Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. My name is Marilyn Shannon, and this is the Breaking Free Show. And I am delighted to have you here today. It's going to be a most intriguing show. And before we get on, I just want to say hi to Amnon, our producer.
Hello, how are you, Marilyn?
I'm fine, and you?
I'm just fine.
Good, 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 good. Good to see
It's
you.
getting chilly outside, isn't
Yeah, it
it?
is. I've got to wear
Nice.
long sleeves. I
Yep.
like wearing long sleeves. Anyway, this is your show. Remember that. So, anytime during the show, if you would like to call in, ask a question, make a comment, please feel free to do that. With any comment, any question, I'd love to have you. So, you can call in at 919-518-9773, or you can come in on Skype, and that would be voice, not video, and that is computers, then the number two, K voice. And then we have a chat available for you as well. So you can put your name under the video. Nickname will work. I don't care. And put your comment, make a suggestion, whatever you like in there. Ask questions because that is what's going to make this show pop. And I will tell you what, I got a lot of questions. And so I don't want to make it all about me. So I want to make it about us. So please feel free to call in anytime you want. So my guest today is Dr. Sheva Marcus, and I am so excited to have her here. Sheva. Okay, thank you. Hello, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. I'm excited to be here.
Well, we are excited to have you. So tell everybody, first of all, who you are and what you do.
So you know my name, it's Sheva Marcus, and I am the clinical director of Mays Women's Sexual Health. It's part of a larger consortium of a men's sexual health center, a women's sexual health center, and a laboratory. Mays Women's Health is a medical sexual health center. So we see women for a whole variety of sexual health problems like low desire, no libido, problems with arousal, problems with orgasm, and pain issues. And we approach every patient from a both psychological as well as the medical perspective. We are the largest independent sexual health center in the country, and we see thousands of patients, and I personally feel honored to be able to enter into women's lives in such a personal and meaningful way, because as we know, sex really affects so much of what we do and how we feel about ourselves.
And what makes your clinic different?
Mays Health is one of the only places in the country, I won't say the only, where we do the medical and the psychological. So we have doctors, nurse practitioners, therapists. Every patient who comes in gets a full workup, both from the psychological and the medical perspective. And unfortunately, that is not the model most of us work with. Either people have a problem, they go to a sex therapist, which is great. You can talk until you're blue in the face, but if there's a blood flow problem or there's a hormone problem, nobody's going to pick that up. The flip side is they walk to a doctor who tosses, hormones at you or drugs at you and doesn't really talk to you about maybe behavioral changes that need to happen in order to make them work. And so if the medical solutions give you X and the psychological solutions give you X, this isn't X plus X, this is X squared. And we have a really effective way of working with patients so that we see real results. And sometimes the therapist is more involved and the medical person a little less. And sometimes we start with the medical and then bring in the therapist. But we really are holistic, and we try to get a whole picture of everything that's going on in order to help, because sex is complicated. Marilyn, people think of sex as being, easy and straightforward, but it's complicated. It's really complicated.
Like, give us an example when you say that it's really complicated. Is that because of all the, it could be this, it could be that kind of complicated? Things that people don't even understand complicated?
Yeah, like a woman comes in and, she comes in because she hasn't had sex in a year, right? And we say to her, why, so then I'm sorry. I'm just losing my thing here because something popped into my screen. A woman comes in, she hasn't had sex in a year, and I will sit down with her and try to figure out what's going on. And is it a problem in the relationship? Is it a problem with her hormones? Is it a problem with her husband, quite frankly? Is it a problem that, she was having pain and so she stopped having sex, and then they kind of got out of the range of, they just stopped doing it and they haven't figured out how to reconnect. Often it's a combination of those things. So like a woman comes in and she says, I have pain, but the pain might be one very small piece of it. I haven't had sex in a year and I have pain. Okay, so she goes to a doctor and the doctor maybe fixes the pain. But in a more significant way, we need to figure out kind of what's happening in the context of the relationship, her feelings about herself. All of those pieces have to be looked at in a way that's actually can be put together and helpful. So does that make it clear?
Yeah. So patients come to you. Can you, do they come to you? Can you do it virtually? How does it work?
So we don't work virtually, although we do get that request quite a bit because we have a few offices. We have New York, we're in City, we have Westchester, we have Long Island. But if you're in Milwaukee, then it's much more complicated. Right now, we don't do things virtually, and I don't think that would be a great model because some of this is like actually looking at your vagina, taking your hormone profile. And I still am a believer in face-to-face therapy, even though I know more and more therapists are working virtually. And sometimes we'll do that. Like if a patient comes in from Milwaukee and has the first 2 or 3 appointments within the space of a few days or a week, and then may continue to see a therapist virtually and get things prescribed. So we can do that, but I would never recommend somebody to try to do the whole thing virtually.
I see.
Yeah, we do have, and this is going to get us into a little sidetrack, but it's an interesting one. We do have patients who come in from overseas for a procedure we do for vaginismus. I don't know if you're all familiar or you're vaginismus. So it's incredibly common. It's the inability to get a penis into the vagina. And there's a huge range of this. There's women who can get a penis in, but it hurts so much. Is it okay if I use language?
Yes, I told you in the beginning, and I'm going to tell you all out there, I told her in the beginning to talk about whatever she wanted to. And I just was going to cut her loose. So go.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that penis. So,
yeah.
And you men out there, if you're in a relationship and you cannot have intercourse, the penis can't go in the vagina, that's a condition. It's a condition called vaginismus. It's actually not even rare. Like 11 to 17% of women are supposedly had. That's 1 out of every 10 women or more. And sometimes you can get the penis in, but it's extremely painful. And sometimes it feels like there's a wall there and you just can't get in at all. And I cannot tell you, of all the things we treat, this one really just always sticks out because it's so common. It's so not spoken about. All the women who have this problem think they're the only ones in the world. The partners of the women are often so depressed because they feel like they're hurting the women. And it's so freaking easy to treat. Like it's so easy to treat. So we can talk about, usually in many, many cases, we just treat with, it's a combination, again, this is where the psychological and the medical comes in, of tight muscles. Like the muscles at the entrance to that vagina are small, but they are so strong. And so if it's small, I often will use my ring as an analogy. Like if this is the entrance to the vagina, you can't get a penis in there, but it's a little tiny muscle. And so what happens is when there's pain, the woman starts getting fearful. And so she tenses, and so it gets tighter. And then it just creates this never ending, cycle of pain and fear and pain and fear. And so when somebody comes in, we have to do an analysis of how much of this is fear and how much of this is tight muscles, and how do we approach both of those things? So we do that with a little bit of therapy, stress reduction, sometimes medication to reduce stress, and then break the tight muscles using what we call dilators. They're just little plastic sticks, tiny ones that get bigger, and over time, women get used to more and more comfortable to using them. So if somebody comes in here, often we've had women who have been married for 25 years and have never consummated their marriage. One that always sticks out with me is a woman who came in who was married 11 years, hadn't consummated her marriage. Her husband had an affair. That finally brought her in. 8 weeks later, she was fine. It is not a hard condition to treat. Vaginismus is the easiest condition to treat. But recently, I would say recently, in the last 5 years, we've started using Botox injections in the vagina for the really hard cases. And so we have women who fly in from all around the country to do that. And that is a procedure, takes 20 minutes, and it kind of gets you on the road to getting fixed. And It's tricky. I mean, I never want women to feel like you fly in, we put you under, we put Botox in, we put, we press on those muscles, stretch it out, and you're all done. It's not. You still have to work on it, but it gets women past those first few steps of anxiety and fear and the initial pain. And so we do have people come from around the world for that treatment here. For the most part, people have to come in and see us a few times.
So
That was a very
is that
answer,
condition
very short.
is that
Mhm.
condition does it have anything to do with age, or is it ageless?
So that's a great question. So the vaginismus I just described, where it's concomitant with a lot of fear, is usually young women. It's usually women who have never had intercourse. What we see in an older population, like already moving into my age, like perimenopause or menopausal women, is that the tightness happens and we need to do some of the dilation to re-stretch the muscles, but the fear is not there, right? So if you have a 55-year-old woman who was having intercourse for a lot of years and now all of a sudden finds that it's extremely painful and her doctor just keeps tossing estrogen at her and that's not helping, then very often it's the muscles having tightened up, and then introducing the dilators is great. And she's not scared of putting those dilators. And then it's just a matter of slowly working on it to make it happen. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's a great question. A great answer.
Yeah.
And I want to get into more of this, but one of the things I'm curious about is how did you pick this world for you to work in? What was it about this for you?
Oh my God, that is such an interesting question. So I grew up in an Orthodox Jewish home. Sex education was totally non-existent. I felt like I had no answers, but was very curious, as are many young teenage women and men. But I did grow up in a family that really pushed sort of exploration and understanding. It was a scientific family, ironically, because nobody ever talked about sex. So I was always interested in this. And my career started in a completely different direction. I was working in the organized Jewish community. But then by chance, I ended up working with a urologist who was doing male sexual dysfunction, still is doing male sexual dysfunction, Mays Men's Health. And that was just the dawning. This was like about 20, 25 years ago of this whole field. This field of women's sexual health from a medical perspective is brand new. And you know what brought it on? This is actually a great story. Viagra came on the market in 1997. Viagra changed the world, okay, for all the doctors, all the men who were in research and were looking at how to treat male sexual dysfunction were blown away when Viagra came into the market, because you could walk into primary care and a doctor could hand you a pill, and in way more than half the cases, it will solve the problem. So this kind of put out of business, or at least sort of was a shock to a lot of the specialists who were doing male sexual dysfunction and who were doing who were doing erection issues. And so all of a sudden, the researchers, the pharma companies, the doctors, all of them were like, wait, what do we do now? Oh, maybe women also have a problem. And so the whole field of women's sexual dysfunction kind of was born at that point. And I just was at the right place at the right time. And I was fascinated by it. And we decided to open a women's center. And I went back to get another master's and a PhD in human sexuality. And we really grew the center from day one. So that's how I fell into this. I kind of fell into it, but it's always been a passion. It's always been something that I really felt strongly about.
There's so much to talk about, so many directions to go into, but one fascinating note for me, aside from the medical, because medical is the psychological and the religious perspectives that get dumped on sexuality and intimacy. And you must, coming from where you come from the community you come from, and kind of being sensitive to the fact of all that's going on for women today with sexuality and control and, what they can do, what they can't do, who they are in society, who they're not, depending upon where in the world they're located. How does that all affect what you do and the people that you see?
So, it's such an interesting question, Marilyn, because our center, Mays Women's Health, is not in any way affiliated with any religious identities, and we see it's a cross section of women from every walk of life. But because I'm also an activist in the Orthodox Jewish community, and I'm known for that, we do see a fair number of women who come in from the Orthodox community, either from my community, which is pretty modern, or from the more ultra-Orthodox community, which is, the Hasidic community, or just the general ultra-Orthodox community. And so there are certain things that are across the board the same for all women. Like, I feel like the level of shame that so many women feel, even non-religious or very religious, like they just feel, everybody feels like they're not normal. I always feel like the biggest question I get, or the question I guess most commonly is this normal? And if we had a broader range of what is normal and what is acceptable, I think everybody would be an awful lot happier and feel less like they didn't fit the mold. Where the religious communities have a problem is that they really do almost no sex education. Now, you and I know that sex education in general America is not great, to say the least.
Right.
But the lack of it in these religious communities is so extreme that, patients will come in, women who are married and, really they don't know what a tampon is. They've never heard the word orgasm. So then you're starting from a different level of trying to help, because you're trying to sort of build a body of knowledge. It's like teaching somebody to read when they don't have the alphabet. So that's tricky and can be disconcerting. But the flip side of it is that can be so exciting, because you turn people's lives around when you open up sexuality to them. So I've had patients who came in who looked like, I always laugh, there was this movie Pleasantville where it was in black and white, and when the hot motorcycle guy comes in and brings sex into the picture, and all of a sudden the movie bursts into color. And sometimes I feel like that's what we're doing with some of our patients, because it's really dramatic.
Well, it must be, and for a woman to be able to find you and come in and kind of be set free.
Yes.
I mean, and honestly, yes, and traditionally, globally, I mean, this information is so important for women to realize, because their sexuality is what keeps them in relationships, what keeps them controlled. I mean,
yeah, I have this one patient. I've had many like this, but there's one, maybe she was one of my first ones, so it sort of really had an impact on me. It was a young woman who was getting married in a few weeks and was petrified and didn't want to get married, and was just like really hysterical almost. And her father brought her in to see us, and they believed it was because there had been some kind of what they thought of as sexual attack when she was young. And I sat down with her, and she had an experience when she was young where she was like walking through like a forest, and some guy had sort of jumped, her, and she didn't woke up later, and her underpants had been removed, but he had never attacked her. So there was that experience, but in my talking to her, it became really clear to me that experience actually wasn't so overwhelming to her. She was petrified because nobody had ever talked to her about it. She had no idea what was going on. She didn't know what people were scared of. Like, they dragged her to the hospital, but she had no idea why. She had never had any physical contact with her, parents. There wasn't a lot of hugging and kissing. She had no idea what to expect. She was petrified that when she got married, it would be painful. And so my doorway in with her was to say to her, if I can promise you it's not going to hurt the first time you have intercourse, will that reduce your stress level? And over the next few weeks, we worked together, and I worked with her with dilators, and ultimately something that looked like a penis so that she knew what was going to, be happening. I gave her a vibrator that happened, like an internal one to use internally, but she had her first orgasm that way, sort of unintentionally. Her life just changed dramatically. And the quick jump to suggest that this one little attack, one sort of overwhelming attack, this incident that had happened would shape her life, was just so unhelpful. Our sexuality is really an amalgam of many, many events. And although that was upsetting, it was really almost minor compared to all of the other pieces that she needed to sort of address and go through. But by the end, I'm telling you, our front desk was laughing. They said she used to look like she was coming in black and white. And she came in, I think, the last day before her wedding, like in a pink sweater. She just seemed like a happy person. And she called me. I remember I was on vacation and she called me the day after. She invited me to the wedding. I didn't go, but she called me the day after to tell me that that first night had been so wonderful and fun. And she said, if I hadn't seen you guys, I would have been shaking the entire wedding. Like I wouldn't even be able to enjoy the wedding because I would have been so scared of what was coming after. And so that's, I mean, that's very, I think, a very good example of what happens
Sure.
sometimes when you're working with some of these really sheltered women.
So what is the difference between the condition you mentioned earlier, how did you pronounce?
Vaginismus.
Yes. And just let's say when a woman, as she's aging, it gets drier and
Okay. Right. And what I would call secondary vaginismus. Vaginismus is what happens when you are hitting menopause and, things aren't working anymore. So I'll tell you a great story. I had a patient, this is like, I don't know, 15 years ago, a patient called up and she said, I'm 58 and I've been married 30 something years. We always had a great sex life, but in the last 3 years, I'm having excruciating pain. And I want to know what you're going to do to help me. And I was laughing because I was like, we're really good, but we really can't diagnose over the phone yet. Like I haven't done that. We haven't been able to do that. So she said, well, I want to know because I've been to 3 of the top gynecologists and they all keep just throwing estrogen at me, local estrogen. And I'm like, okay, why don't you come in and let's see what's going on? And the local estrogen was needed, right? Your tissue in your vagina really does dry up and it really needs to kind of get rehealed, but the muscles tighten up as well. And so nobody was addressing the muscles as well as the tissue. And so again, and no, she wasn't scared. It took 2 weeks, I think. I remember her calling me and she was laughing. She was like, this is the most low-tech solution. And I don't know if I should be happy or I should be upset. Like, I can't believe for 3 years I was walking around. But nobody thought to deal with the muscles because they don't think of the muscles for, women who are in menopause. They think of the muscles maybe, if they think of them at all, for young women. But there's so many things out there now. There's local estrogen, but there's also alternatives, and there's great lasers. We use lasers in that situation, but you need somebody who takes a holistic approach, who says, let's look at the whole, what's going on. Let's look at the dryness if that's an issue. Let's look at the tissue composition if that's an issue. Let's look at the muscles if they've tightened up. But let's also look at what's going on with your husband. Because if his penis isn't as hard anymore, then it's going to be much harder to have intercourse, right? Or if his desire is dropping and he was always the engine, then that's going to be an issue too. So somebody needs to get the whole picture.
So there's hope for pretty much everybody.
So I do think that there is hope for pretty much everybody. I know that sounds a little Pollyanna-ish.
No, well, I can. So there'll be 2 of us Pollyanna-ish.
Good. I think there's hope for almost everybody. And I will say there's one category that really still frustrates me a lot, and I'm trying to figure that out. And that's women who, have really tried everything to have an orgasm and can't. And so. But we're good. I would say we can get 98% of women to have an orgasm also, even though they may have been frustrated and haven't been able to do that. But I don't like 98%. I like 100%.
Right.
So I would say for almost everybody we see, there really is hope. And, especially these couples where you haven't had sex in so long, and then like learning how to kind of approach each other and be there with each other again is not always the easiest thing. You got to get those gears moving in the opposite direction. So again, somebody who solves the problem but then doesn't deal with the relationship is not doing anybody a big favor.
And what do you say to the women who they come in and they might say, I'm making this up. They might say, my husband asked me to come in, but I really don't want to have sex anymore.
You're not making this up, Marilyn. You are like 100%. I get that all the time. So that is a conversation, because we can't help you if you don't want to be helped. That I will say, we can't help you. But the argument I would make is, and this is the conversation to have, is, do you feel like something's missing in the relationship because you're not having sex? Like, sex is not about putting A in slot B, at least in my opinion. It's about what happens in the whole relationship, right? It's about how you feel about each other and feeling young and sort of like having fun together and feeling a closeness that that's what sex should be in its best form. And so do you feel like your relationship would be helped if things were better sexually? So that's piece number one. And piece number two is, do you want to have sex again? Because often that's a hormonal issue, right? So believe me, when you see two 17-year-olds who are in line at a movie theater who cannot keep their hands off each other, is the first thing you say, oh my God, he must have sent her flowers, or they must have had a really meaningful conversation? No, their hormones are raging. So why don't we accept that for 17-year-olds? Why don't we realize that's a problem for 50-year-olds or 60-year-olds? And we can do something about that. And I've seen it make dramatic differences, both for men and for women, I will say 100%. And so the question becomes, like, in a perfect world, would you want to have sex? Now, if your answer is no, I don't like him, I do not respect him, I am perfectly happy living parallel lives, well, then that's your right. I would never impose that on anybody. But realize what you're giving up when you're giving up a sex life. It's not just the act of sex itself. It is everything that goes around it, I think. I mean, did you see that movie? There was a great movie with, oh my God, Meryl Streep and Tommy Lee Jones called Hope Springs.
I don't think so.
Oh, you have to see that movie, because I think that
Hope
movie
Springs?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And what's funny is, I went to see the movie when it came out, and my husband, he hates going to these movies with me because he's like, oh my God, it's like watching Field of Dreams with like an umpire. Like I'm sitting there and, oh my God, that must hurt her. Or he would definitely need Viagra. Like, so that part is irritating. But they did such a good job in this movie showing how the sex life affects so many other parts of your life. And it's not just about the sex, it's about the relationship. And I just think marriages are hard, and it's happier. And when you're having a good sex life, it makes a big difference, Marilyn.
And so, this is so cool. This is so cool, because these are things that, you sort of, people kind of go along and just accept as this is the way it is, and this is the way it's going to be, and I'm not going to be 17, nor am I going to be 30 or 40, and and everybody, for me, right.
Yes,
So
yes.
to know that, go ahead, say that. Go ahead. What are you going to say?
Like, I hate it when women come in and they say, I asked my gynecologist about the fact that I have no sex drive, or I'm having pain, and they say, oh, get used to it, we all have the same problem. Oh my God, that makes me insane. I can't even tell you. Or I have a woman who's in, and I'll say to her, I see on her paperwork, she's been in therapy, couples therapy for, a year, and they haven't had sex in 2 years. And I'm like, well, what does your therapist say? And she's like, oh, the therapist never asked about my sex life. And I'm like, what kind of world are we living in where everybody just feels like because they don't have the answers, there are no answers? Like, that's not helpful to anybody. So yes, I do, Marilyn, think that almost everybody can be helped. This is a really important issue, and I'm working on a book for whatever it's worth.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens.
And what is the book going to be about?
It's exactly this. It's for women of every age to help them analyze and figure out, like, what actually, something's not working in my sex life. What are the problems? And so I try to outline them and sort of help people identify for themselves. And then the question is, like, what are the solutions? And then I run through a whole host of psychological solutions, behavioral solutions, medical solutions, lasers. Like, it's an attempt to help you kind of figure out what's wrong with your sex life and start on the way to fix it.
And I know for all of our male, our audience out there that are men, I want to talk about things for you too. But some of what we're talking about, whether it's, the issue might be different, but how you are feeling about sex or not feeling about sex is pretty much the same.
They are not so different.
They're not so different. Yeah, I didn't think so.
Not so different. Low desire, which is a huge issue, men have it as well. And that can be addressed. Or, when their erections are just not working, and then they start being avoidant because they feel like there's something wrong with them, as opposed to it's fixable. Like, honestly, the urologist I work with always laughs. He said, I can get a dead guy an erection. And it's true.
Could you get him on my show? Can you get him on my show?
Sure, I'm sure he'll be happy
Oh,
to
I
do
would
it.
love to. He could get that is that's phenomenal.
Yes, and it's true. Like erections are easy, you know? So when you have a couple coming in and like and I can't tell you how often I see a woman and she comes in. I find this amusing, but she comes in, she goes, my sex drive, we haven't had sex in 6 months and it's because I have no sex drive. And then I start asking questions and her sex drive isn't great, but it's not that different than it's been for the last 30 years. And I'm like, well, what happened? Like, she said, well, my husband got tired of like being the pursuer. And I'm like, in my head, I'm thinking, that doesn't really make sense. For 30 years, for 25 years, and 6 months, he was fine. And now, like, I was like, well, maybe his sex drive has dropped. And maybe he was the engine to your sex life. So let's see if we can get him fixed. And so, that is a huge piece of it. Low desire is treatable. Erections, there are now lasers for men who are like a little gun shy about the medications. There are lasers that have significant impact on erections and the firmness of the erections as well. There's not actually laser, it's shock wave, so it's a different kind of wave, but
right.
For all kinds of purposes. But men's stuff can all get fixed also. And often I feel like the men are more motivated. Like the men, well, I don't know if they're more motivated or they're more likely to think there's a medical explanation, whereas women tend to think it's all psychological. So that's complicated a little bit.
So, and there's a lot of things I want to talk about as far as connection and the beauty of intimacy. I want to get into that some, but I want to ask you, what is one of the areas or major areas for young women, that might come see you that are in their 20s? Is it, I don't want to say what it is, but what is your experience telling you?
So pain is significant. Like I feel like women in their 20s often have pain and they don't have anybody to answer. They go to the gynecologist says, I don't see anything, it's fine, it's not fine, and so it's pain. And I could be happy to break down into what that is, but for the women themselves, they just know they experience it as pain. There's a wonderful new podcast out called Tight-Lipped, which you might want, if you're a woman who's experiencing pain, you may want to think about that. There are women who don't have orgasms and are not sure how to help themselves have an orgasm. I feel like if women learned how to masturbate younger.
Oh, I was just going to ask you about that. Yes, that was my next question about masturbation.
Yes. What's your question?
Well, I want to know.
Everybody should do it.
Everybody should do it.
I think especially for young women, that is the best way to learn your body and learn what feels good and how to give yourself pleasure. And then it becomes much easier to help a partner give you pleasure once you are aware of that, right? So, so that I would say, if I had to say the two things for younger women, it would be pain and orgasm issues. Not to say that they don't have desire and arousal issues also. Often we see desire problems with eating disorders because you mess up with your hormone profile dramatically when you have eating disorders. So that comes up. But the biggies for the young women, I'd say more likely are pain, whole variety of types, and orgasm issues. And women, as they get through their 30s, they've had children, then pain is still often an issue, but because childbirth has its own issues, but like low desire. And some of that is overwhelming, tired, too much going on. But I think it also creates havoc with your hormone levels. And then, older women have a different kind of pain and low desire, and it's harder to have orgasms. And those orgasms are easy. Like women who come in who used to have orgasms and are having these like weak echoes of them, those are slam dunks. Those are usually the easiest to solve.
So are we having what I would call, by listening to you and the fact that you even exist, are we having a healthy sexual revolution?
I don't think so.
We're not?
I think everybody, do you think so, Marilyn?
I wonder, because here we are talking about all of these things. Women are coming to see you and not sitting back and just, they're inquisitive. You're on my show, you do a podcast. I'm just people coming to you from all over the world. It would strike me as something is shifting if women are not accepting their fate in life, period.
I would really and truly hope that that's the case. And definitely, I'll tell you where I do think we're having a big revolution, and that's with pain. I think women are sick and tired of having pain. And I think for decades, women just grin and for it.
Right.
So I think that's changing dramatically.
Okay.
And there's really excellent people out there dealing with pain. Jen Guntner, who writes for the New York Times, wrote a book called The Vagina Bible, which is about pain. And there's a lot of pelvic floor physical therapists who help a lot with pain. So we are in a revolution there.
Okay.
I think what you're seeing maybe is that we're living longer. So this is what's interesting, right? Like if you only lived to 50, then your sex life or 55 wasn't that important, right? Afterwards. But people who are living to 75 or 85 now want to have sex. And so I think maybe that's what we're seeing. And I think, sadly, I feel like our bodies are built really only to last till 45 to 55. I mean, it feels like that's when things start to fall apart. And so what's fascinating is that we can sort of really use medicine to sort of help people have a better sex life all those way through.
So and I want to ask you, so many questions. I'm going to maybe ask you to come back.
Come back
yeah. Because I really think that there's so many areas to explore. First of all, so what's a normal, I don't know if it's probably not normal, but what do you strive for as far as how many times a week?
I love that question. That's so funny. I actually do love that question. So I used to hate that question because I felt like, okay, as a good sex therapist, I am supposed to say, whatever works for you is fine. Like, that's what I'm supposed to say. Like, that is
right.
But I don't really believe that. That's the truth. I mean, I do believe it. I feel like if a couple comes in and they're having sex once a month and it's great and they're both happy, that is fine. I really and truly do believe that. But for years was saying to myself, and then people would say, like, really, what do you think, Sheva? And I would say that if you're having sex in a long-term relationship once a week, and it's good sex and you both feel happy about it, that's great, a minimum of once a week. And even if it's once every 2 weeks, that's sort of okay, although that's when you start seeing the cracks, I think. If it gets lower than once every 2 weeks, that's when you start to see some cracks developing. Now, again, not for everybody, but if we're looking at a bell curve, kind of the middle of the bell curve. I used to say that because that's what I thought. And then somebody did this great research project where they used data from, like, I don't know, 50,000 or 60,000 people. And the results were that up until you're having sex once a week, the happiness factor increases. And then after that, it stabilizes. So it's fine to have sex every day. That's awesome. But like up once a week feels like works quite well for couples. And obviously it really matters what's happening in your life. If you have 2 little kids, it's much harder to have sex once a week than, if you're both retired. So that there is some play, but I would say once a week, if you're in a long-term monogamous relationship and you're having sex at least once a week, that's great. You should feel really good about that, and that should be fine. Now, if somebody's unhappy with that, if one person in the relationship wants it twice a week, that's great too. You can deal with that, but you were talking about the bell curve, so I'm smack in the middle of the bell curve.
All right, good. Okay, so I want to remind everyone to please feel free to call in 919-518-9773, or you can come in on Skype, and that is computers, that's plural, then the number 2K voice, and then also you can join us in our chat and ask questions. And I mean, this is a great opportunity. So if you have
people are really uncomfortable asking their sex questions, I'm just telling you.
Yeah, well, I get that, but you're amongst friends here, and if you want to write it in the chat, and I'll do the asking because I ain't embarrassed. So, and I'm not ashamed. I'm not embarrassed. I think that this is very important. I want to know more, and I want to know more for you. So please feel free to connect. So sex. It makes you happier, makes you feel connected, helps you feel connected, helps you feel pretty, handsome, loved. What else?
You did a great job there. So it's good for, let's just start physically. It's just good for you. It's like, can you imagine having a part of your body that you just didn't use for a year? Like, that's just not good, right? So you want to use that penis and you want to use that vagina and you want the blood flowing there. They always make comments about the vagina as use it or lose it, but a vagina that has had it doesn't necessarily have to be a penis in the vagina, but it has no like blood coming into the area, no orgasms, no like neurological stimulation, looks different than a vagina, which is getting regular ongoing
Okay,
use.
so hold on a minute, but it can recover, right?
Yes, It
Okay,
totally
if
can
it's been
recover.
laying dormant for a little while, it
Yes,
can be
it
okay.
totally can recover.
Okay.
It can recover. I mean, yes, both a penis and a vagina, but they just need a little resuscitation. But yes,
Okay.
they can both 100% recover.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Go ahead. What were you going to
Physically,
say?
that's good for you. So let's just
Yeah.
start with that. And
Okay.
then emotionally, I think there is something about feeling alive. There's something about sex that makes you feel alive. And I feel like I really need to make this point because I'm sure some of the people watching are not people that have regular partners. And you could be your own best partner. Like, sex for one is a great way to have sex. And it's a perfectly legitimate way to have sex. And sometimes it's the best way because you know when you're in the mood and you know what you want to have happen. So having regular sexual activity, whether you're alone or with a partner, is just good for you. It makes you smile, it makes you laugh, it brings blood it moves blood around your body, so it probably makes your skin better. And then if you have a partner, there's almost nothing like sex that makes you guys feel connected. It's something that you two do together that you're not doing with other people in most cases. Some cases that's not true, but in most cases that's true. It's allowing somebody to see you intimately in a way, like really see you. And I don't mean, let's say, physically see you, but like see who you are. Like there's something very vulnerable about being sexual with somebody, but that could be incredibly powerful to allow somebody else to see you.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you feel wanted. It makes you feel beautiful. All the things you said, Marilyn. It makes you feel special. It makes you feel connected. And often it makes you laugh. And
Yeah.
laughing is great.
Yeah.
So, what?
No, I'm agreeing.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's why it feels sad to me when you have like older couples who've kind of given up on their sex life. It just feels sad.
Is there a new conversation to have with our children? I think that since so many of us uh, grew up with it wasn't really discussed, it was in my generation it was the beginning, very tip of the bird of sexual education in school, and it was always no, 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 and it was more about the Tampax than it was about anything else.
Yeah.
So is
Now
there a
it's about the
conversation?
condom.
Huh?
Now it's all about the condom. So yeah. Anyway, go on. Is there something we should be doing as parents?
Yeah, is there something, some awareness, some kind of conversation that we could be having with our children? And of course, it's in stages and it's age appropriate. But what do you is there something that you kind of think is important or what?
Yes, 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 yes. I love talking to parents. I love talking to parents. I feel like parents leaving it to school to take care of it makes me crazy because I
Mhm.
feel like as a parent, you're the only one who can pass along your values to your kid. And leaving that to a school system makes no sense, especially because all the schools, sex education in America today is all about how not to get pregnant and how not to get STDs. It's nothing about pleasure. It's not about making yourself happy. It doesn't touch any of those things. So here's the most important thing. You want to start talking to your kids young if you can. And that doesn't mean that if your kid is 17 now or 32, it's too late. But the younger you can start talking to your kids, the better, because then it sort of destigmatizes it. If you started having conversations when they're young, they don't think twice about it, nor do you. So that's number one. I always say, talk about sex early and often, right? You wouldn't have a nutrition conversation with your child. You wouldn't sit them down when they were 12 and then start talking to them about, nutritional content. You would laugh, right? You're talking to them about nutrition all the time, right? It's when you're in the supermarket or when you're cooking dinner or when they're trying to have a third candy bar. That's all of those times are when you're sort of talking to them about nutrition. And talking about sex should be very similar. Watching television, when things happen in the schoolyard, when they're taking a bath and they're learning their body parts, when you hear them making a slur about somebody, all of those are moments when you can just say a sentence or two and communicate to them things that are important for them to know and for you to know. So, when you're a little kid, you walk into the bathtub and they're masturbating, you're like, oh, that feels really good, right? That's great. Keep with it. I'll be back in 5 minutes,
What about how parents are with their children? I know my daughters, my nieces, they cuddle with their children, and most of them are boys. They cuddle, they are sensitive. The boys love kissing and hugging and sitting on everybody's laps, and they're love bugs. I think it's healthy, but you tell me.
That's amazing. I mean, that is when I was talking about that very ultra Orthodox girl who was so freaked out about having a relationship. she had none of that at home for a whole variety of reasons. But I feel like learning to touch and cuddle and kiss and snuggle and, those are so important. And I feel like that in the end is what translates to your kids, that what a loving relationship should look like. And those are the kids that grow up to be adults who are able to enter into like snuggly, wonderful relationships. And that's amazing. Tell your daughter or son or whoever it is, they're doing a great job.
Yeah, and my son-in-laws too. I mean, they hug the boys. They are are real demonstrative.
And
Eh,
in that way, we are having a revolution, I think,
Oh,
in
we
certain
are?
parts. I think so, because I think for a long time, like in the 50s and 60s, men were supposed to be men. They weren't supposed to cry and they weren't supposed to want to hug and snuggle and cuddle. And I feel like, I don't know if this is across the board, but certainly in certain socioeconomic levels, you're seeing it. There's a much bigger acceptance of men and being men in the whole variety of gentle and sensitive and loving. And you're smiling. What are you thinking?
No, yeah, I love this. I mean, I've loved our whole conversation, but I particularly love this one because we have an obligation, I think, to support and change the direction that things have gone for many of us, and we can impart something different for our children. And we don't have to be afraid that the boys are going to be wimpy and the girls are going to be this. And
Not
love
at
is love.
all.
Love is love, is my opinion.
Right. And touch is touch.
And touch
And,
is touch.
our erotic maps are really created young. I mean, I feel sometimes like in our attempt, because of this whole Me Too movement, which has been so powerful and important, we've sort of pulled away from what I call lusty love, love that's a little bit more aggressive. But I think within the context of a real relationship and a meaningful relationship, that's really important. Like both kinds, the snuggly, cuddly, romantic, red roses love, and the sort of aggressive, I want your body now kind of love. And I feel like we need to embrace all of ourselves in the whole picture.
And how much does self-image, I'm sure it does, play a role in your work? I mean, your patients and their self-image. That's huge, I would think.
Yeah, self-image, but not necessarily. Yes, self-image is critical, but what's ironic is how a person feels about themselves sexually and whether they're attractive often bears no resemblance to how attractive they actually are. That's what's really striking, right? Like I could have a woman who comes in who by objective, community, or societal standards is like, a hot tamale, tall, thin, long blonde hair, and she's having no sex and she doesn't feel good about herself. And then I'll have one of my favorite clients was a woman who was about 45. She was short. She was chubby by societal standards. She was just cute, but she was certainly not somebody you would say, oh my God, she's drop dead attractive. And I'm sorry, she wasn't 45. She was significantly older than that. So she was like she was like 58 or something. And she had 3 lovers. And when she came to see me, she had a 29-year-old, a 45-year-old, and a 72-year-old doctor she had been seeing for a long time. And she just thought everywhere she went, she just exuded openness and happiness and lovingness. And that's very sexy. And she
Yes.
was open to it. So yeah, I think that we need to understand as a society, and the women and the men looking at this or watching this or being part of this conversation need to understand that you should, whoever you are, if you feel alive and you feel sexy, there is somebody out there who's going to also feel like you're alive and sexy. And you just have to put that out there in the world.
So what is sexy? Because I'm listening to talk about this woman, and I envision women walking into a room, and they're not always the thinnest, but they walk into this room like, like they own the room, and everybody looks at them, and they have big butts, they have big boobs, whatever they got, they just flaunt it and feel good about themselves, and they're magnets.
Yes,
So
I don't
yeah,
even think she was such a flaunter. I think
okay,
that she was just like she smiled, she looked people in the eye, she was happy to
and
connect.
it's a turn
And
on. It's a turn
that's
on,
a
right?
magnet. Yeah, that
Yeah.
is a magnet. And yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think, did she wear low cut glasses? I don't even think that she particularly strutted any part of her body. But
Got it.
I think she was just, think about it. A woman comes in and she's drop dead gorgeous, but she's cold. And you don't necessarily want to be there with her, but somebody comes into the room and, shakes your hand and she looks you in the eye and she smiles and you feel like she's present. Like, who do you want to be with? You want to be with that person who sees you as a person and who you can see as a person. So that, I do feel like that has a lot to do with sexiness.
Right. So for our audience that's out there who don't feel that way, you have success with people coming from feeling like they just belong on the sofa to somebody who feels better about themselves and can feel that sexiness.
Yes, I feel like, this goes in lots of different directions, but some of this has to do with learning maybe by yourself to like figure out what gives you pleasure, what makes you happy, what gives you joy, and what gives you sexual pleasure. And you can do that work by yourself. You don't need a partner to do that. And you then, I feel like it just opens you up to a different level of connecting with people out there. And some of that is, people have body dysmorphia. They feel like no matter what, they feel unattractive. And sometimes that could take significant amounts of therapy to kind of help people, but it is helpable. And sometimes, we're living a weird chicken and egg question society. Like, is it that you feel attractive by yourself, so therefore you can be more sexual? Or is sometimes connecting with your sexual self going to help make you feel better by yourself and make you feel more attractive? And so I'm sort of in the camp that says the latter is often very helpful. So, yes.
I remember years ago, I was working with a client and she was having, issues about herself. And I remember just suggesting to her that she wear a different kind of a top, a shirt, just one that maybe was a V-neck, maybe not
Yes.
one that was up to her neck, but just, not one that was plunging, just a little V-neck. And just showing that amount of skin made a huge difference in how she felt, in her freedom.
No, I think that is absolutely true. It's sometimes I'll talk to women about buying sexy like nightgowns or negligees, and I say to them, what you need to focus on, and not what your partner thinks is sexy, although that's good too, but you have to focus on what makes you
Right.
feel sexy, because that's what's going to make the difference,
Yeah,
right? Like you want to
absolutely.
wear something that's going to make you want to like turn on the lights and
Right.
strut out of the bathroom,
Ab-
and that might be a white teddy or it could be a long white nightgown. I don't know, but you need to be in touch with what makes you feel sexy.
Absolutely. If you feel sexy, somebody around you will feel it too. I mean, there's no question.
Exactly.
That is contagious. So so
Exactly.
so tell everybody, like where you are located and how they would connect with you and all of that stuff.
So we have offices in New York. We have two that are relevant. So we have an office in Westchester and an office in Manhattan. We have Mays Men's Health. You can look it up. Mays Men's Health and Mays Women's Health. There's two different websites. And there's tons and tons and tons of information on those websites. So if you're having a specific question or a medical issue or a psychological issue, go to those websites. If you want to call us, you can call and make an appointment. The Women's Center, we do these 10-minute free consultations to see if it's the right place for you. So if you're thinking, May, I'm thinking of coming, but it seems like a long way, please call. Insurance issues, they'll check those out for you as well. And come see us. Don't ever feel like you have a problem that's not solvable, because I promise you, we can help you.
Mm. So don't go anywhere. You have my books, right? Okay. This is a perfect time for me just to segue into my 4 books: Listening into the Hearts of Men, Listening into the Hearts of Twins, Millennials, and I am really working hard on completing in just one afternoon, Listening to the Hearts of People Impacted by Opioid Addiction. But I am working with someone who has been very dear and who has been struggling with his addiction, and I am following him up and down the road. So once we feel that we are complete, that book will be ready. I do have 2 events coming up on the 7th of November in Greenville, North Carolina at Nucleus Co-working, and that is going to be an event with millennials and an audience talking to millennials about millennial issues and how they feel, how they think, how they identify with themselves. And then the next night, which is on the 8th at the Apex at Cocoon Gallery, will be the heart and art of twins. And we have these two fabulous, famous twins, sisters coming to the gallery. We'll be talking about how being twins has influenced their art. They're both kind of famous. It's going to be fun. It'll start at 5:30. If you have any questions, please contact me at Marilyn at MarilynShannon.com. So we have a few moments left, and just a few. So what have we not covered that you feel is really relevant at this point and what you want to share and get out into the world?
So I think if it hasn't been made clear yet, let me just, maybe it bears repeating that your sex life is not just about what happens in the bedroom, once a week or once a month. Your sex life is about you, the essence of who you are, in a really fundamental way. And it's never too late or too early to get started making your sex life great. And let me add, your sex life is not stagnant. It's not like you come in and we fix it and that's it. You're on your way forever. I don't know where we got this idea that you like ride away on a white horse and your sex life will be the way it is. It's going to change. Your sex life changes. And so, if you're 18 and it's not working for you, if you're a guy or a girl, come on in. If you're then 23 and things have changed and things are not working as well as they used to, or something's the matter, you're in a long-term relationship and it's complicated, come on in. If you just had a baby and you feel like your wife's not interested in sex or you're not interested in sex, something's happening, come on in. If you're getting perimenopausal, like things are constantly changing, and the unexamined sex life is not a good sex life. A sex life which is always being looked at and dynamic and changing, that will allow you to have sex for the rest of your life in a really good, healthy way.
And I also believe if you are single, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if you are single and have no sex life and have no mate, male or female, but you want to, but something is just not comfortable, I think that's also a phenomenal time to go in and seek out assistance, right?
Yes. I cannot tell you how many people we have seen who didn't have a relationship because they were nervous or things weren't working well in their sex life, and sort of psychologically they never just felt prepared to go out and actually meet somebody. So absolutely, thank you for raising that.
Oh, my pleasure. And one more thing, and it's probably too big to talk about, so you'll probably have to say yes or no, to be continued. LGBT, what about that? Do you see?
Yes, we do, of course, see LGBTQ, and in some ways, they're very similar to other people. If you're a woman having a relationship with a woman, you're not that different from a woman having a relationship with a man. But there are things that are different. So yes, we absolutely see those as well, those populations.
So, and I loved what you said about it's not just in the bedroom, because when you feel that connection and you take that out with you into your day, there's a sunniness about you. There is a feeling of, just kind of like you are, content and feeling much better about yourself, I believe.
Absolutely.
And that,
absolutely.
Right. And that feeling spreads. So it's, yeah. So we've talked about a lot of different things, and I would urge you, my dear audience, that if you have something specific after today that you feel is really relevant and you want us to talk about when this lovely lady comes back on our show, because I know she will, write me at Marilyn at MarilynShannon.com, and we will make sure that we include, further questions and further information, and we'll go from there. But I want to thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Marilyn. This is really a lot of fun.
It was terrific. I'm so glad, and I'd love to do this again and touch upon some other things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So with that, everyone, thank you so much for being here. We always appreciate it. We appreciate you so much. We will see you next week. Bye-bye.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Telestream's Wirecast software, StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.